Spurs against United, two managers that are in disarray, in trouble like you wouldn't believe. And whoever loses, if other results go the way that we're potentially predicting them to go, Everton and West Ham, they could end up 16th. Is this win or bust for Ange?
Yes.
Is it win or bust for Amorim?
No, because he's not going to get sacked. But it's win or bust for Ange for sure, because it depends on the manner of the defeat as well. Daniel Levy's shown that he's a businessman. I think he probably assess it financially before making the decision to sack Postecoglou. But if you look at the weird thing about Spurs, right, is that they've lost 13 league games this season. Horrendous. But barring the 6-3 loss against Liverpool, every single one of the defeats has been by one goal. So they've been in every game this season almost, apart from that Liverpool game where they got turned over. And that's why their goal difference is what it is. It's plus 11, but they're in the bottom half of the Premier League table. So
Confusing.
it will be a close game. There's not a game that Man United are going to turn up and batter Spurs, because Spurs have shown against the best teams in the country, whether it's against your lot where they turned you over or against us where they were in the game, they are in games. But I just think for Postecoglou, there's only so much losing Spurs fans can take. There's only so many cup competitions you can go out of. I think they'll hold on to the fact that, we're still in the FA Cup, we're still in the Carabao Cup. Those two dangling carrots have gone. You're still in the Europa League, but do you expect Spurs to win the Europa League? I don't. And so if you continue to lose league games, eventually things will start to turn. Spurs fans, I think a lot of them have already turned. But if they lose against United and lose badly, I think Ange is gone.
I think it's sort of the shame of modern football, which is that success has to happen now all the time. I think when you look back at this season in 10 years, Spurs fans probably won't remember this season. City fans probably won't remember this season. But because everything's here and now, you get pushed into this feeling of like, they're 15th in the league now, they're 14th in the league now. He has to be sacked. How dare Spurs be 14th? But like as you said, they've been in pretty much every single game. Before all the injuries, even when they were losing, they were by far the better team, and there was just like a little bit of bad luck or like a tiny little bit of an error. And I think if you're a footballing person, which I don't actually believe Daniel Levy to be, but I think if you're a footballing person who loves Spurs and you look at what Ange has done and the way that they are playing, I genuinely don't see a point of sacking him. They haven't got any of their managerial appointments right in the past, whether it's been Mourinho or Antonio Conte, two of the best managers of all time. They didn't get them right because they weren't supported properly. You've got a manager here who clearly the players are still playing for him. You saw that when they beat Brentford 2-0, all of the players waiting for him to come over and then going to celebrate in front of the fans. He's had a ridiculous injury crisis. And I just think, do we always have to care that much about whether we win this week or where we finish this 1 year? I think there's clearly a project going on at Spurs. And I think once Ange gets his players back, they'll start winning games anyway. I genuinely don't expect them to finish in the bottom half of the table. And I think once he gets a little bit more backing and a little bit more money to compete with the big teams, which Daniel Levy is so desperate to do, but won't actually stump up the cash to do it, I genuinely think he could be the man to lead Spurs to some success.
The only thing is, where I agree with a lot of what you said, when you talk about like it's 14th, like you can give up this season, I just think as football fans, like away from the success part, 14th for Spurs currently means you're below Crystal Palace, you're below Fulham, you're only just above Everton, you're only just above West Ham. You've lost 13 times this season. Wolves, or more so Ipswich, who are second bottom, have lost 14 times. There's certain things that I think football fans can go, I can look away from that. But there's also certain things where I think they go, it's just not on.
But what happens? What
Yeah,
happens?
but-
Who do you get in? There's no guarantee of success. It's just another 12 years or 15 years without a trophy.
I understand that, but then you look at the league table, right? And we were big proponents of Ange when he first came in. I want him to succeed as much as I don't want Spurs to succeed. But you look at Southampton 20th, sack the manager. Ipswich are never going to sack Kieran McKenna because he was managing them in League One 2 seasons ago. Leicester, sack the manager. Wolves, sack the manager. West Ham, sack the manager. Everton, sack the manager. Man United, to above Spurs, sack the manager. Every team down there, barring Spurs and Ipswich, have sacked their manager. So why are Spurs any different to any of these other sides?
Because they've had the injury crisis.
And the injuries, I understand that. And I understand the here and now point that you made as well, because if you think about the last time Spurs won a trophy, 2008, no one remembers how poor Spurs were in the league that year. They were terrible. But everyone remembers that one day Ramos won them the League Cup against Chelsea in February. But you just look at the results and they're not good enough for Spurs. And I think that when you point to injuries, yes, injuries are a big part of why Spurs are down there. But I don't think these players returning is going to change much. First of all, Van de Ven is integral to what to what he does in terms of Postecoglou's setup, but he's perpetually injured. This hamstring injury didn't just start when he came to Spurs. At Wolfsburg, he had the same injury. So you can't guarantee a bank that he's going to be there. It's almost getting to Reece James territory now with Van der Ven, in terms of, it's a benefit when he plays, but you can't rely on it. Romero perpetually suspended or injured. You look at Maddison, is he so much of a plus when he comes back into the team? Solanke's first season at this level, is he a guarantee to firing goals to lead you up the table? And so I know their injuries are problems, but I don't think there's a guarantee that when these players come back, this form changes.
But then that suggests that the players aren't good enough. And it suggests that for Spurs to have any success, they need better players. I mean, they've been playing with Heung-min Son all season. He's very clearly past it. He's very clearly lost it. He did when Harry Kane left, but he still salvaged some of it last year. And he's probably like the first name on their team sheet. So you can't say that the players are the problem and Ange is the problem, I don't think. I think injuries have obviously hampered him massively, we know that. But I also don't think that anywhere near enough money has been spent on that squad, unless you're just happy being a mid-table team who will occasionally get into the Europa League spots, maybe win a Europa Conference League in the next 5 years. But that's clearly not what Daniel Levy is going for. That's not why he built that new stadium. But his actions don't match up to his words. He spent all this money on a stadium, which is fantastic. It's great. The Carolina Reapers or whatever play there. Brilliant. Brilliant.
Do
Do you know what I mean? No, Carolina Panthers, whoever it is. It's fantastic.
That's just him dismissing American sports.
It's fantastic. Fantastic. It's for American sports. So what does that do for Spurs fans? It does nothing.
I swear you just named the Chile. That's not a team.
No, it's the Panthers.
It's the Panthers.
Carolina Reapers, by the way. Respect to you.
But you are right in terms of, like, it's a dereliction of duty in terms of the way Daniel Levy has managed this football club since he's taken over it. And he hasn't spent enough money in the transfer windows. He hasn't supported his managers enough. Hence why Poch didn't work out in the end, or Poch wanted to leave. Hence why Mourinho didn't work out, Conte didn't work out. It's obviously on the ownership group, but at a football club, fans can scream and shout at owners, but they are not going to change. They are not going to change. And you can't sell all your players or bring in 11 new players. So the one variable that you can change is the manager. And we've seen in the Premier League that change of manager does change results. If you look at this Everton squad at the beginning of the season, or even partway through the season under Sean Dyche, you're like, this team could go down. They're not very good. As soon as you bring in a competent manager, things do start to change, despite the fact that the ownership group aren't good enough. And so I do think that if Ange loses game against Manchester United, fairly, I think Spurs fans will be asking for a change, because they know that Daniel Levy's not going to sell the club anytime soon, and the January transfer window is closed.
I think also, like, you both kind of touched on it, but the culture at both these clubs, we haven't mentioned Manchester United that much, is just wrong. Like, Spurs fans, we have a producer's a Spurs fan, I don't know what his expectations are for this season, but Spurs are 14th, and if Spurs finish 7th, I think that's success. But Spurs fans think they want top 4, or certainly the ones that I know are top 5, and I just don't think that's realistic. Because if you look at, say, Newcastle, who are right up there, they've got a £100 million striker, they've got a £70 million winger, they've got a £60 million centre-back, they've got 2 midfielders combined for 150 million. Spurs are still slugging away with Bentancur, respectfully, Maddison, respectfully, the back four is Jed Spencer, and I just think, like, even the transfer window towards the end, they bidded for Mark Gahey last minute and ended up with Danzo. Like, it's just a little bit messy.
But that Mark Gahey signing was just a red herring. That's what Daniel Levy does all the time. It was a fake pretense that, oh, look, we are willing to spend money. That's what he does all the time. And you're right, like, they have no right. And it frustrates me because people speak of Spurs fans as if they're the problem. Like, oh, Spurs fans expect to be in the Champions League, blah, blah, blah. But they've never been there. They've never won anything. But a club that is the size of Spurs, with the support that Spurs has in a stadium in London, should be competing regularly. But there is no proper investment in that squad to do so. Like, you had a few seasons with Pochettino, who was playing well above his level, and at that time you had the greatest striker in the world and a fairly solid defence. That side is much better than this side now.
True. I love this, by the way. Manchester United fans are going to be stunned because we've just spent maybe 10 minutes talking about Spurs, and the question at the start was win or bust for Ange or win or bust for Amorim. We've probably answered it. It's not win or bust for Amorim, but I do worry about Amorim, like, in a lot of ways. Their recent game, they brought in Dorgu. He played out right wing back instead of left wing back. Dalot played out left wing back, and I get this feeling, similar to Ten Hag a little bit, that, like, I really like Amorim, but I think the cauldron is eating him alive, and he's struggling. And I sense that from the way he's talking. I sense that from the decisions he's making. I sense that from, like, he started Kobe Mainoo as a false nine in one of the games, and I was just thinking, this is not you.
Yeah, no, the Kobe Mainoo thing is when I started to worry, because Mainoo played really well as one of the number 10s behind the striker against FCSB in the Europa League. And so, okay, cool, that works, because Mainoo in a double pivot, Nets Ugarte just doesn't actually work. Copenhagen doesn't cover enough ground for that to work. But then in the following game, you play him as your false nine. You are burying the kid because he's not a false nine. He's not a striker. Granted, he hit the post in the first half. Was it against Palace?
Yeah.
But these decisions are bizarre. And again, the Dorgu thing, again, Amrim sometimes likes to play left-footed wing backs on the right, and I understand that, but it's strange decisions that he's making, and we've been such big backers of Amrim, and I do still think he's a quality manager, but I'm looking at Manchester United, and I just think they're the problem.
Yeah.
And they looked at Ratcliffe and Ineos coming in as a massive hope, and this is where we're going to turn things around. Go and ask Nice fans what they think about Ineos. They'll tell you how good they are as owners. And so I think that at Manchester United, I don't think there's one manager that's going to come in and fix them. I think they're in the mud.
I'm sitting there so smug. So smug. That's exactly what I said when you two were fawning over Amrim because he had a nice puffer jacket on.
He looks the part.
This was so obvious. And I think that thing you say about Amrim is so true. If you look at the before he came to Manchester and afterwards, it's not just the weather. I'm telling you, that guy is dishevelled because managing this football club is incredibly, incredibly difficult. No one has done it successfully since Fergie. There's a reason for that. And they need a whole overhaul of their squad, and they need a new board if they're going to succeed.
You're not wrong. I think he said like a few weeks ago, I think he said it's my 40th birthday, but it could easily be my 50th.
He's saying,
Struggling,
I'm going to play the goalkeeper coach rather than Marcus Rashford. I'm saying, I'm with you, Amrim. I really back you, but it seems like this job might be a little bit too big.
Honestly, in the early weeks, like, what he was saying, I was like, I'm encouraged by your words, and now I'm going, maybe just stop talking. Talking's not suiting you anymore. And I'm doing the same with Ange. Like, talking's not suiting you anymore either. But anyway, let's get to score predictions. I just want to very quickly say, by the way, Tottenham have scored 48 goals this season. Manchester United have scored 28. So score predictions, Kim.
I'm just looking at this. Spurs have scored the third most goals in the league. Wow. And this at 14th. Score prediction is going to be goals, isn't it? And I think Spurs will win, even though Manchester United are probably better away from home than they are at home at the moment. I think Spurs win, but I think it's going to be an absolute cracker. I think a 3-2.
Yeah, I think both teams will score. Like I mentioned, Spurs are always in games. I think Spurs lose though. I think Man United win this one 2-1.
That might mean Ange's gone though.
Yeah, I think it'll be gone.
I think Spurs win. I think when I watch the two teams, I think Manchester United are genuinely bad at football. Yeah. And I think Spurs have injuries, but I can still see a pattern. I still see a style. So I'll go Spurs 3-1.